because we are a city that is full of incredible and special people. I want to begin by saying thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity to even stand here before you on a beautiful Saturday afternoon in Albuquerque. And I know that what we saw throughout last summer and what we saw in the fall was an election that our city had not seen in a long time. And I mean that not even if you were a supporter of mine, even if it was for someone else. We saw a community engaged for the first time in a long time. And that was reflected in the turnout that was almost double what it had been in the past. And so this is a good thing for our city, but it's a reflection of how far we have to go and how different things need to be. And so I'm super grateful for the chance to actually do this for the next 4 years. And as we stated from day one, this has always been about a movement and about a vision that we're going to implement together. Now, that's not going to be easy. It's actually getting harder. Like every day when I walk in on Monday morning, I'm like, oh, didn't know about that. You know, so we'll talk about some of those issues in terms of ART and others. But we are ready for the challenge. And our city is ready for the challenge because we know that we've got to push past a lot of these issues that have been holding us back and finally move forward. And so that's what we're going to talk about here today. And there's a few things actually that I get to do, which is sort of much more technocratic than we would normally do, but that's why this event is so special. We have never had, to our knowledge, at this stage in the city of Albuquerque with the new administration, an event like this. This is the first of its kind in Albuquerque, and we think very few even around the country. And so this is the bridge from a transition process that technically was only 8 days, but one that we've taken our time with and that we're going to kind of culminate with today. But it's a bridge also into a strategic planning process that we're going to engage the community in and actually demonstrate that notion of community governance. So I'm going to talk about what next and all of that at the end. And so if some of you have to leave, etc., just know we'll map out the process going forward as we wrap up today. Community engagement is by definition a little bit messy, a little bit unorganized. And so we're going to do our best to get the most out of today. But I want to remind folks, it's kind of impossible to hit a home run with an event like this because of everyone's different opinion of all the big issues. So we're going to do the best we can. That's the goal. And the good news is, since this hasn't been done before, it's going to be great. Hello. Welcome to Block by Block. Today we're actually doing a little bit of role changing, and I'm excited that I get to actually interview folks who were involved in our city's capstone transition event. And so I want to start by talking with Frank Mirabal. A lot of things that people don't know about our city is that we have a director of community engagement, and so we're lucky that Frank is in that role, and he's been with the city actually for several years and was the person in charge of putting together this really cool capstone event for our community. So Frank, why don't you begin by telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. I think, as being a director now working for you, I think this is the first time I get in the director chair. This actually feels pretty good.
That's nice.
Yeah, so, I've been working for city government the last 4 years. I have a background working in nonprofits and with government agencies. But most of the work that I've been doing over the years has been engaging the community. And so really thinking long and hard about how do we engage community, in what ways, what hours do you want to make sure that you're engaging that way they have equal opportunity to be involved. And this whole notion that you're forwarding now around community governance. So democracy was meant to be that. And so now going into communities and tapping into the wisdom of these local communities really is near and dear to my heart. So I'm happy to do that type of work.
Great stuff. Tell us a little bit about this event. I know for me it was a transition period that was truncated by the runoff election, so we only had kind of 10 real days. And so we got together and brainstormed a little bit, and we thought that really a great way to wrap things up would be to invite anyone who is interested to come and tell us about what to do for the city. But it's easier said than done actually to pull something like that off, and we're going to hear some highlights of that in the rest of the show. But tell us a little bit about your philosophy behind the event, Frank, and how you put it together.
Well, I think the first thing was like the overwhelming response to your campaign and during your candidacy. So if there's like 1,000 people that wanted to stay charged up and stay involved, and I remember one of the first meetings that you and I had, and you said, "Hey, Frank, guess what? You're going to be leading the transition now, and we got about 1,000 people that want to be involved in this." And so when we were looking at that, we said one of the best ways to really get people involved is having a big event where folks can discuss the issues that are most important to them. And so we had like 15 different topics, everything ranging from job creation to education to the environment. And so we tried to create topics that were near and dear to our public's heart. And so the capstone event really was about 500 people that were just really fired up about creating change in our community. We had facilitated dialogue throughout the day, so folks got to give their input. All that input was collected and consolidated into one big start, stop, scale plan, which we can talk about in a second. But it was really a cool event because we were able to get the public involved in community governance, which I know is near and dear to your heart.
Very good. Now, the takeaways from it, a lot of people would ask, and it was amazing to be there and have folks, they would say like, hey, this is the first time I've ever even heard of this kind of an event. And actually, to our knowledge, it was one of the first times it's been done, at least in recent times, and especially in New Mexico. But tell us about, so what happened to the information? How did you organize it? And what's happening next?
So, we organized it, using a 3S model that, the recommendation came from the administration, start, stop, scale. So what can we be innovative around? So starts, things that we can initiate that city government currently isn't looking at. Stop, what are some of the things that city government might be doing right now that we need to just reconsider because we're not getting the type of results that we want. And then scale, if we have promising practices within the city of Albuquerque, what can we do to scale them up to have broader impact? Do we scale them to another neighborhood? Do we scale them to a different demographic? Or we can even scale down, right? So if there's things that we need to consider like tightening up and we need to scale down, we can do that as well. And so that's the format that we used. Really good feedback. Some of it was very affirming, so you're going to be hearing from one of our facilitators of the public safety conversation. And he'll talk a little bit about the public's desire to continue this community policing model and what it means for police officers to have a presence in the neighborhoods that they're serving. And then, education. Folks really thinking long and hard, what is the city's role around education? Being that we don't control the school system. So what can we do to accentuate and provide enrichment opportunities for the kids that, before school, after school, in the summer months? So there's a lot of really good information that came about. Segments like this are really important to getting the feedback back to the public. We also will be, initiating a newsletter pretty soon to where we're going to be sharing some of the results from the event and how we're responding through our, governance and decision making.
Sounds good. Well, as we proceed forward too, we're going to hear from some of the folks on specific issues who are involved, and also on the docket for this summer is trying to integrate a way to continue the discussion. And so our city's putting together a performance measure indicator kind of program that they've done for a long time, but we're going to really kind of turn this inside out and make it just the next phase of continued community governance and discussion on our key issues. And so we'll look forward to hearing from you on that, as well as ways to volunteer and engage with the city over the course of the summer as we continue to get organized and build for taking a step up for Albuquerque. We're here with Dr. Garcia, who led our crime and police session in the capstone event. And so we're excited to hear a little bit about that. But Dr. Garcia, maybe just to start out with, tell us a little bit about your background and your experience in Albuquerque.
Sure. I'm a lifelong native. My family opened up in Modelo back in 1940, so I kind of grew up in that area of town. Just retired from C&M as Dean of Students, but have been lucky enough to do work for previous administrations in community engagement. And so when Frank called me to help facilitate this one, I was excited because it was public safety. And that's always one that it can be exciting from the perspective of all the different things people want to do. But as Dean of Students, I had worked extensively with various law enforcement agencies, federal and local. So it was exciting to be a part of that. So thank you and your administration for hosting that first go-around.
Oh, absolutely, and glad you were able to help out and continue that tradition of helping our city.
Sure.
And also, I love the El Modelo connection, man, and that's where everyone has so many memories from there, as do I. But the most recent one, well, two. One, that's where I took the bassist from Pantera when we had to have a agreed upon restaurant.
Okay.
And also the morning after election, I was taking my family to the airport, the ones that live out of town. And so we caught breakfast on there on the way out of town right after the election night. So it's very special. But anyway, love the place.
Awesome.
Now, but back to Capstone.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about who all showed up, like their backgrounds,
Sure.
and then how things started out.
Sure. Well, we had two groups. My wife and I facilitated by breaking into two groups. Her group had mostly civilians from the police council teams that the city has. I had a mixture of APD officers, neighborhood citizens, business people. The meetings, it was exciting from the perspective that people came in with a level of civility and engagement. And so when we started with the session, we weren't sure which direction it was going to take. But what was nice about it is that people, oftentimes people may come in with problems, and that's all they want to talk about is problems. Both groups came in not only addressing issues, but also solutions to the issues. And there was a level of, hey, let's do this together, let's work together. There was a sense of your administration being so kind and open to working with the community, and they were excited about that. They were excited about a sense of change is going to happen, and change isn't going to happen just by one group making that change, but by the entire community. Almost a sense of building a healthy community by doing it together.
Well, that is, it's something I heard over and over on the campaign trail. This need to reconcile, some of the challenges that we've had and the trust that's been eroded in the community, but then also a desire to step up for law enforcement in all ways that we know we need law enforcement for. And so, we're continuing to work on that, and I know we got a lot of good ideas. Why don't, if you can remember a couple of highlights or takeaways.
Sure.
What do you remember most vividly from that?
The partnerships, wanting to create partnerships, that APD can't do this alone. And this came both from police officers and the community members, saying that let's create partnerships between the schools, which I found, now that was surprising to me, because they thought by going into K through 12 and creating more partnerships at that level and creating a sense for our children, our future citizens of Albuquerque, to really recognize how important it is with public safety and to understand the police department and fire department. So that was a surprising thing that came out of that. There were the typical mental health concerns, as well as concerns for other social type issues, but the education one was really, really interesting, as well as the sense of going back to creating the community policing model where police officers would go into neighborhoods, and neighborhoods would hold potlucks for their officers, and they would get to know their officers, and there was a sense of community from you're like me and I'm like you, and let's respect each other, and let's have clear dialogue here, and let's truly understand that this is about solving something together, not about you being a police entity and us being the citizens. So that sense of unity was really a resounding foundation that came from that, is a strong level of partnerships. But the partnerships with the schools was very, very interesting for me, because that was a new one that I hadn't really heard from previous dialogues or discussions.
Well, that is a powerful notion, and this theme of unity, I think, is one that we see is echoing throughout small areas and large areas. Even in City Hall, this idea that we're one Albuquerque, we're not different governments, we're not the city and the county and this kind of thing. And then that is also interesting about this notion of taking responsibility for all the challenges that we're facing, whether it's education, policing. We really are in it together. So that's a really powerful message.
It is. It is.
Well, thank you for helping out with this event. We'll probably tap on you for some down the road, and appreciate all you've done for the community and all your volunteerism. And thank you for sharing your insights today.
And thank you.
We're here with Claudia Isaac, who's a professor of planning at UNM and led our session around community planning and some of the new ordinances that have come out over the last year. And so, Professor, maybe to start out with, tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience here in Albuquerque.
Well, I've been teaching in the Community and Regional Planning Department at UNM for 30 years. Much of my work revolves around working with community-based organizations and neighborhood associations. So many of the people who were at the Integrated Development Ordinance session are people who I've been working with for some years. So it was an interesting experience for me.
Well, for folks who are unaware of this, because it can get a little bit technical, why don't you maybe summarize for us the IDO, or what it stands for, and kind of when it passed, and why we're even talking about it. Why is this so important for the community?
Well, and I'll try to do this quickly because it's a long history. Previously in Albuquerque, neighborhood planning was done through what were called sector plans. Sector plans were very participatory plans that were developed between the planning department and members of a neighborhood, residents of a neighborhood. This had really positive impacts for the neighborhoods because they could express their vision for development in their community. It created kind of a bureaucratic nightmare for the planning department because they had separate plans for multiple neighborhoods. There were overlapping boundaries. It was kind of a mess. But the solution, the Integrated Development Ordinance, was developed. First of all, the positive reason was to pull everything together so that there was one integrated development ordinance drawn from all of the sector plans plus focus groups, et cetera. Many people in the neighborhoods really felt the loss of their sector plans. It was more than just a document for them. It was an expression of their will, their vision, their identity. And so I think that there was some missteps in process along the way. And so this was an opportunity for members of the community with the new planning director, David Campbell, to talk all of that through and have an opportunity to express their concerns, express what they actually want to see in terms of positive development, and how they would like the process to be shifted so that they can be more engaged in that process.
Well, I know my own experience, even with the International District Sector Plan I helped with, and I think that was the last one that didn't get authorized. We did all the work and then felt that identity definition, and we're so proud of it. And then, I know even for me to see it never even get kind of officially sanctioned was painful for our community as the former state senator there. But it is interesting, having seen the overlaying maps, you can see why this was a challenge for the city to actually administrate. So tell us a little bit about, the folks that were there, of course, were from the community primarily, but I think there were also some business folks and some government folks. Was there anything that they really agreed on, out of curiosity?
They agreed that positive redevelopment is needed and necessary, particularly in disinvested neighborhoods. Communities that have felt sort of sidestepped in the development process. I think there was an agreement that there are ways to do this well. And so most of the concerns were about just how much voice community members were going to have in that process. I think that there were also, frankly, several who wanted to have a conversation with the planning director, and he listened and responded, I think, with great respect, which I think was really important. With some sense that moving forward there is a possibility of that kind of dialogue. I think several people told me in the breaks that they were just pleased to have been invited to such an event, that they were actively included in this event, and they didn't feel actively included in the IDO process before. So they're looking to, I think there was agreement that this is a promising moment it's a promising moment for changing the way things have been done, the way communication has happened, to move forward in a more productive way.
And tell us that is a tremendous outcome given the tension that I think this created, and in some ways some of the division. There is, I think, an interesting piece here about that it's an ordinance and then it seems to come into effect over the summer. Tell us a little bit about, I guess, where sort of the ship has sailed and what we can do with council and what we do without council. One of the things we talked about is, what can a mayor do on their own? What can we do with council, and what can we do with other stakeholders? Mm-hmm. Anything really shake out of that parsing of the action items?
I think that there was a strong sense that although it's the council who enacted the ordinance and it has gone into effect, although there had been a request for a delay, and I think that all of the members of these communities are going to continue to work with their councilors to maybe step back a little bit. But there was a strong sense that you as mayor have an opportunity just to declare that neighborhood voice is critically important, and that you stand behind community voices and community engagement in an effective way, not in a I'm going to teach you about planning way.
Right.
That there is
There's
a
a
great
lot of
deal
that in the past.
there has been that there's a lot of expertise in communities, and that they bring experiential and, frankly, formal planning knowledge to this process, and that they're looking forward to being supported and backed by your office and by your staff in that.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for sharing that, and that wisdom of our neighborhoods, I think, is so important. And I know we've been trying to fill a lot of our board vacancies, for example, with neighborhood leaders, and it's interesting, actually, even the pushback we get on that, and we're trying to stand by the idea that folks who live in an area should have a say in what happens in their area. And so I mentioned that too, to let folks know that they can go on to cabq.gov and click on how to get involved, and then click on boards and commissions and apply for all of these different boards that tend to actually govern planning. And that suggestion that you made too, I think, is so important, where we are going to try and do that in every way that we can, but we're going to need everyone's help. And it does mean formally engaging in the city's boards and commissions. It means working with council. Planning is one of the few areas where council has retained a lot of authority, even though we have a strong mayor system. And so I've already experienced some of the same frustrations our neighbors have, because I've got to go to some board or commission, even as mayor, and try and voice my opinion on a project, because it really is become a little bit of its own machine. And so we're going to try and work on that one. But very insightful, Professor. Thank you for also being a bridge just between that academia that we need to learn from, and also the community, which is ultimately in charge of our city. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you so much for tuning in to our Block by Block program, and stay tuned for our next edition, where we'll continue to talk about issues facing our city and our community, and we look forward to hearing from you as well.
Because we are a city that is full of incredible and special people.